Hi, and welcome to this episode of the 01581 Let's Talk. On today's episode, we'll hear from our Town Manager Kristi Williams in her weekly update. We'll also hear from our Police Chief and Lieutenant Mike Daniels on police accreditation and certification. So let's talk. Kristi, welcome back.
Thank you.
You're, what is this, number 3?
Number 3, yes.
We'll stop counting after 5, I promise. All right. So you have some exciting news for us. It's all about communication today in your update. So tell us what you have.
Yeah, great. So this week we will be launching our very first quarterly newsletter. So this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I know some other towns do it. And we were able to do that with our management analyst position, really taking the lead on it. So Owen Page, thank you very much. But so it's called What's New Westborough. So I'm just going to hold it up. I'm not sure which camera to show it to, but this is going to come out. It's an online newsletter, so we'll send it out via email, but we'll also post it on our website, on our social media links. So we're really excited about it.
Excellent. And what sort of content will be in there? Because, twice a month at least, you provide a town manager update to the Board of Selectmen. And so how is this different, or how will it complement that?
Sure. So this, I think, is going to be, because it's quarterly, it'll be sort of larger events or projects that are ongoing from different departments and also committees. So, this is our first crack at it, so we're certainly open to feedback. Our town manager report, I think, is going to be more maybe ongoing operations,
sure.
Unless there's something larger that we want to report in between the quarterly newsletters.
Okay.
But we definitely, we want it to be value added. So we want to make sure that people are excited to get it and that they read it and it's not too long.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole calendar of important dates and events that are upcoming. We have a bunch of sort of blocking in it that says, did you know? So maybe things that maybe you don't know if you're not living in the municipal world, or just things that you might be interested in, and lots of links as well. So if there's something in it that you want to learn more about, there should be a link to learn more about it.
Excellent. And you said it will be emailed, so how would someone get an email?
Sure.
Or
so
get an emailed copy?
Our initial publication will go out to everyone who has already signed up for the town news. And then there's information within the newsletter on how to subscribe, but you can subscribe through our website.
Okay.
So we're hoping to really grow that subscription list.
Excellent. And so today, and I honestly don't recall, where is that subscribe for news, or how would someone get this if they're not already on that list?
Sure. So on the town website, there's a page or a link to news and alerts. And so you can sign up for meeting minutes from different boards and committees, agendas, things like that. And then some people just sign up for town news. So that's that's really our biggest list of subscribers. So that's what we're gonna go through first. And we also wanna make sure that we're sending this out to other people who may be interested, such as our legislative delegation, just to keep them kind of updated on what's going on here in Westborough.
Excellent. And I would hope that members of our business community, right, want to know and follow as well, to be aware. And so you mentioned website. Exciting news from our town meeting and I believe we talked about it on our last episode, that the appropriation was approved for that. And so where are we at, and what do you want to share?
Sure. So, I think this upcoming fiscal year is really all about communication and trying to really engage the public. And so this newsletter is one of those things, and the town website update we really think is going to be another. So we have just signed the contract to move forward. We also, at the last select board meeting, you've all voted to change our domain name.
Right.
So we're going to be westboroughma.gov now, which is a lot shorter than what we currently have and easier to remember. And so, I think in the next few months we'll really get started. The public probably won't get to see that for several months because it's going to take a lot of back end work. But definitely we'll be back here to tell you all about it when it's ready to go. But we just really think it'll be much more user friendly, easier to find information. As part of that also is our new, the zoning bylaw that just got recently approved has been reorganized to be easier to follow. But as part of that project, has a better online presence. And so that'll also be unveiled in the coming months for the public.
Yeah, we start to see all these pieces come together. You know, the town departments, I've talked about this before, have done such a great job of really using, leveraging Permit Pro for, you know, conservation, fire, building, et cetera, and departments coming together to use that. So we see this continued push and sort of integration of those departments using, you know, technology that is not only more efficient for the customers they're interfacing with, so let's say builders, developers,
Right.
or whomever, homeowners, but also for the public to be able to say, I have a question, like I saw my neighbor down the street doing some work, what's going on? They can actually go in and look at that information and understand it without having to make a phone call and someone pulling a paper record, et cetera. So, and of course we have lots of other records online, so it makes sense, the transparency.
Exactly.
What is the anticipated timeline for the website, for kind of when the big reveal is to the public?
I believe it was about a 9-month process.
Okay.
So if we get started in the next month or so, we'd be looking at the fall.
Okay. Great.
So certainly looking for feedback on all of these tools, though. Anxious to kind of hear from the community about whether or not these are accomplishing, the engagement and sort of ease of access goals that we've set out. So.
And there were a couple of communities that you shared with us, or Mark did at town meeting, maybe sort of examples the community could look to that are already using this new platform. Can you just share those?
Sure. So the town of Wellesley is a newer community that's come to this platform, and they've really used a lot of the features. So that's a good one to look at as an example. But our neighbors in Grafton actually also use it. And
super. All right. So folks can go to those town websites and get a sense of what Westborough's will look like with some of the enhanced features. Very excited about that. Kristi, thanks for being our guest again this week. We'll see you next week.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Hello and welcome back to the 01581 Let's Talk. I'm joined by our police chief, Jeff Lourie, and Lieutenant Mike Daniels. Guys, welcome so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a while, so thank you for being here and talking about a really important subject and an accomplishment. So first of all, for the viewers who don't know, we have now a certified police agency department, and that was a huge milestone. So tell the viewers about that and why it's important, why you guys did it.
So yeah, it really was, and very exciting time for the Westborough Police Department. When I took over as your chief 5 years ago, one of the issues that was before us, we were working with policies from the 1980s, and accreditation is all about, best practices. And as a select person, you'll be glad to hear that we hit all the marks for Maya to receive insurance reductions.
Yes.
Which is very, very important. So it's all
And the
about
taxpayers like that too.
taxpayers like that. It's
Not
all
just the
about
select board.
best
Yeah.
practices and making sure that our building meets accreditation standards. As the chief, obviously, we were dealing with a pandemic. We were dealing with certain issues that were going on across the country where Post became Peace Officer Standard and Training Commission to certify police officers, which I believe in. And
Which is what? Can you talk a little bit about what that? We hear that term tossed around a
Post.
lot, right? And how does it relate to certification and accreditation?
So I'm very happy and proud to say we are the first department that is certified. We just had our assessment for full accreditation, which went very well. We'll be hopefully fully accredited in the coming months. But this is the first department in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that's going to be certified and accredited under version 6. And why is that important? It's that very reason it's Post. We're meeting the requirements for the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, which is very important. So our policies now are in line with best practices throughout the Commonwealth. So I can't take credit, for this. Obviously I'm very proud of my staff. Lieutenant Daniels and Sergeant Greg Shipperett, they were our accreditation liaisons. He's our accreditation manager. And it was a lot of work. And to show their benefit, now they also have a lot of work because now departments across the Commonwealth are calling us because we're the go-to department right now as far as how did you get it done?
How did you do it? Right.
And we're the first department. We've pretty much gone paperless. So our Power DMS software, which again, the town's been very supportive on these initiatives. We did apply for a lot of grants. The lieutenant can talk about that. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of work. And it continues to be a lot of work because it doesn't end. We're going to continue with our best practices, and it sets a really professional stamp, on Westborough and on the police department, especially in these trying times where we want to show transparency, such as our body-worn camera program and all the different initiatives that we've really put forward in the last 5+ years. So, and I don't want to take too much of the thunder because honestly, I can't.
We won't let you.
Yeah, I can't thank the good sergeant who can't be with us today. He's at training, mandatory training, and the lieutenant who really attention to detail. I mean, I've never been so impressed. My entire staff, from my deputy chief down to my junior patrolman, to just embrace this model of policing and to be able to get it done with all the. Would I like to say we got it done 2 years ago, but we had some issues with what happens in the world. But here's the finish line. We are done.
Sure, absolutely. And so there are, over 150 standards, right, in the certification module, and at least 100 more at the accreditation level.
Yeah, so the way that it works is, as the chief said, the certification is probably the most crucial because it goes over a lot of the use of force issues and some of the things that we're seeing in post and that we're seeing coming up across the country. So getting that first level of certification is good, but then to add a more kind of prestigious professional stamp on the agency, they ask you to strive for accreditation, and that goes deeper into your policies and procedures, and it adds some components such as performance evaluations, also health and wellness, early intervention systems for your employees. So you add those components, and then they give you, so an agency our size is responsible for meeting 66 optional standards in addition to the accreditation standards and the standards for certification. So what we try to do is when we're going for the optional, the commission says, hey, you're this size department, you have to do an additional 66 before we give you accreditation. But we will let you, we already told you what the mandatory standards are, but we're gonna allow you to look at your agency and see where you think that you can plug in some of the standards that we have outlined here. So we were able to do that.
Can you give us a sense of, for those additional 66, I have in front of me here kind of the topics covered through certification and accreditation, but were they generally focused in a couple areas?
So when you reach, yes, generally. So certification, they focus more on what we call Chapter 1. Chapter 1's all our very high liability areas. When you look at Chapter 41, it covers our operational areas such as patrol. Chapter 80, there's a bunch of different chapters associated with different things. And as you move through the phases, they kind of get, especially in the optional area, they get more and more general. They'll go back and have you revisit specific areas that you already covered, and they'll say, okay, you did this, but we want you to go an extra step and do that. And I can't really, there's so many of them, I can't really think of. Actually, one example that we're looking at now is Chapter 35, which covers performance evaluations, which is something that we're looking at. There's 8 standards in there that we're trying to reach. Those are all considered optional. Now, we've already met our optionals that are required for accreditation, which we should hear back in the summer, but we're looking to go a little bit further. So that way we can have more leeway when they come back in 18 months and they go, hey, what have you guys done? Where have you improved? What are we looking at when we come back for the 3rd year?
I think most of our viewers and listeners would sort of conceptually understand why certification and accreditation is important, but can you kind of explain to them why it's important? What's the impact to the community of having a police department that has, met this achievement?
So I would probably say accountability and transparency is probably the biggest one that I think the community would be of most concern to them, because it really deals with us dealing with people out in the public. So at the select board meeting, I did our presentation and we talked about some of the areas that we're now forced to look at. And not only are we forced to look at it, we have to do an analysis. So for example, bias-free policing. So that was an area of responsibility that I have as the admin lieutenant, to look at what our officers are doing. Is there a disproportionate amount of people of color, minorities, or specific groups that are being pulled over more often? Are we interacting with a specific group more often? And then we're looking at our local demographics and then demographics regionally to see where we are. So once that's done, that's all documented, but then it's ongoing. So every year we have to produce analytics for those specific areas, and then we have to do a comparison to see where the trends are. Are we having more interactions? Are we having less interactions? So that way, it holds us accountable.
Sure.
And Selectman Welch had asked about putting some of our policies and procedures in those analysis online, and we will do that. Once we achieve accreditation, those are things that will be available to the
Well,
public.
it's tie nicely with the new website,
Yeah,
right?
it's been a really a mission of mine is to let the public see some of the policy and procedures that are critical that we're working under. And I think the lieutenant hit the nail on the head. It's all about transparency, showing best practices, what we're doing. So a lot of the data that we're collecting that's mandated through our accreditation process, well, now we have to share that information with Post to make sure that we are in compliance and that our officers are doing the right thing.
Sure. And one of the components that you just touched on, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so as you look at these trends, like, so you were just saying, so you're doing analysis on bias, police bias enforcement. I'm not sure if I'm using the right term. To me, that would also offer an opportunity for sort of I'll call it like the community policing work, education as well, right?
Exactly.
So it's not just about enforcing the law and getting the bad guy, right? Which you guys do very well, but it's really about, okay, do we have a segment of the population that maybe doesn't know how to interact with us, doesn't understand what we do, doesn't understand the rules, and so and maybe doesn't speak English as a primary language. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely, there's always an opportunity. I think previous to having achieved this goal, we always felt that we were doing the right thing through our community engagement, but really, that really doesn't paint the entire picture, right? So us having that data to really look at and go, okay, this is what we need to be doing or what we should be doing as it relates to the community. So I really do think, yes, absolutely, as you said, that there is an opportunity to really not only involve the community, but also show them, hey, this is what your police department's doing for the community, and to bring them in on.
Well, it checks. Look, when you're good at your job and you've done it for many years, right? It's natural to sort of fall into some patterns. So when you have data that you can kind of check, are we doing this the right way? Are we falling into some areas that we need to be aware of and we need to correct? So, so that makes a lot of sense.
And there's an additional check and balance. So when the commission comes back in, and by the way, at our last assessment, typically they'll send people that are they're professionals at other agencies that have either retired. For example, we had a gentleman who I think he was at Lexington PD as a captain. He graduated from the FBI National Academy, so he was a facilitator. We had a lieutenant from Lawrence who's an attorney. Okay. So what was happening, and it's a very stressful event for the accreditation manager, so it's great. Obviously Sergeant Shipwreck's not here right now, but he was, of tremendous help. Because when you have an attorney looking through your policies or looking through some of your paperwork, and they're saying, yeah, this doesn't read well, you have to change this. And now the chief has given us the authority to go, hey, whatever it is that they want adjusted, we have to adjust. And then once it's done, it goes back to the commission where everyone looks at it and everyone votes, and they look at all areas and they say, okay, well, we think Westborough has met all the standards for these.
And just to jump in on that, we had to obviously dispatch you, as you know, is at the fire department under the direction of Chief Purcell. And we had to go over there to make sure that our dispatch area met accreditation standards. And as we were walking back, I was with the lieutenant from Lawrence, and he stopped and looked at me, and you can never feel how good it feels to say, you know what, Chief, you guys are squared away.
That's great.
So it's you bring up a good point about complacency, and I think that's one thing where we're very, our due diligence is, listen, we strive for perfection knowing it's an unattainable goal. We can always do things better. And I think being a part of the accreditation process through MPAC, it's going to allow us to continue to get better. And we don't want to be stagnant. I remember they had the woman who oversees the accreditation process, because we were the first version 6 during our mock assessment. She goes, I know, Chief, I realize that no one likes to be first. And I said, no. We like to be first.
Yeah.
We embrace being first. You know, we want to really lead the way. We
Most
wanna,
don't. I mean, most don't. It's sort of like, I don't want to be last, but I want to tail maybe
Not-
be
Yeah.
like, somewhere in the early
Learn
pack.
from someone else's
right,
mistakes.
That's not our speed.
Right.
And we are going to stumble at times.
Sure.
And I've made it crystal clear to the community, if you're looking for the perfect police department, the perfect police chief, you're barking up the wrong tree.
You're human beings, right?
But
I
we're
mean,
human
that's,
beings,
you're,
and I think that's important too. We, go to the different temples and synagogues in town, and we meet with those folks and try to connect because we do want to get this message out that how can we make sure we meet
Sure.
the needs of everyone.
Well, policing, there's such a mix of, kind of law enforcement and, the obvious part of your job, but so much of what you provide really is a service and guardian, right?
It's a guardian mindset versus
right.
warrior. And,
Right.
and our officers need to be warriors at times, sadly.
Sure.
The use of force is never pretty.
Right.
But the software and the protocols and the programs that we have in place through accreditation, it's justified. And then as soon as that critical incident is done, that switch goes back to that guardian mindset.
Sure.
And that's why, we hire so hard in Westborough. We want to make sure that you folks have the very best people possible providing these services.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about that. How does, because from all the research that I did just preparing today, is accreditation, it's all positive. I mean, the only downside that I could find was there's a cost to it, right?
Yes.
There's from not only the initiation, the cost of the program itself, if you
Right.
will, but the ongoing staffing to support that. But is there a downside when you're looking at recruitment? Is it a positive? Like, how is this viewed if I'm coming out of the police academy and I'm looking around? Is this a motivator for me to work for a police department that's accredited?
I could tell you. So I manage our recruitment process, and that is a significant factor because the thing is, and I remember 21 years ago when I was looking for area departments. I was looking for. I grew up here, right?
Yeah.
So obviously Westborough was my first choice, and I wouldn't have gone anywhere else. But I wanted to be here specifically because of the representation of the police department and its police officers, right?
Sure.
There was a very professional representation, and this department modeled what I wanted to be as a police officer. So I think, the positive aspect of having accreditation is, if someone's moving from one agency to another, let's say we're looking for a lateral, what I find, having been a supervisor and now lieutenant, people like to know that where they're at, where they're going, people are being held accountable. There's a check and balance for different things that happen. So accreditation offers that, right? And it offers kind of a fair look at everything. And then unfortunately, you don't see that with a lot of other agencies because they don't have the resources that Westborough has.
Sure.
I'm an assessor, so I go and I've traveled to other agencies and I see how things are set up.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are things that, some communities can't do, right? Because they
just
don't have the resources. So,
yeah. But I would imagine if you're an officer or of any rank, that the opportunity to come in and have that accountability or to raise your game to be at that level.
Right.
I mean, I think, if someone were to leave here and to say that they worked under, an accredited agency, I mean, I would imagine it helps their resume as well.
So-
we don't want to lose anyone, but
So Sergeant Shipwright's a perfect example of that. He came from Colorado.
Yep.
So and this is one of the reasons why I selected him to be involved with this process, because he had a very deep understanding of it, because the agency that he was at was CALIA certified, which is a federal accreditation.
right.
So he had an understanding for it. So when he came in and we started working on it together, we had a framework to go by automatically. So, and he has a very deep understanding for it. It took me a little while to get caught up to it, but because he was already in an agency that had been following the processes that we're now going to follow, he could say, oh, in Colorado, this is how we did it, and I think this is what this means.
Sure.
And so then I would go, okay. and we'd have to send something to the commission and go, hey, is this the same as this? And they would
Right.
say, yes.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay. So
Yeah.
that actually helped us cut down on a lot of
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
Once we got our systems in place and figured out how we were going to do it, we actually came into it in a very chaotic situation because the commission was moving to the 6th edition standards.
Right.
And
I
it
remember
changed
that.
everything around. So
Right.
when we got into it, we're like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? So, but it's great. As the chief said, now we're in a situation where people are coming to us, and we're not asking for people to come to us, right? It's, the commission, they're saying, hey,
Sending
go
them
to
to us.
Westborough,
That's great.
because the way that they have their system set up and the way they do things, we just assess them. They're doing it right. So send people there.
And you talk about cost, and that's a good point. I think it's pennies in the dollar because you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. We're putting practices in place that are going to reduce liability and reduce issues
Right.
moving forward.
Yeah.
It's just like the body-worn cameras. One of the
Yeah.
questions that we like to ask the potential candidates is, how do you feel about body-worn cameras? If an officer says to me, this is going to change the way I'm doing policing, well, that's the person I want wearing
So
this
change
thing.
the context of the interview
So,
then.
right, yeah.
Right.
But basically, this body-worn camera program, as expensive as it was, proud to say a lot of it grant funded and earmark, through our legislature. But I can't tell you, people will call up, try to file a claim. As soon as they say, well, we'll review the body-worn camera footage, and they'll be like, we're all set now. Because the body-worn camera is showing that your officers, we are doing things right. So it's all about, I think, the investment that we made, whether it be the BWC program, body-worn camera program, or accreditation. I think it's going to pay for itself times 100 because we're going to reduce that liability aspect to it. So I think sometimes, you got to pay a little bit more, but in the end, I think we will be saving quite a bit.
Sure. So just briefly on liability. So one of the issues that we saw out of, kind of George Floyd, all the other cases that none of us want to have to relive, certainly, not, I know you guys don't either, but is the long-term accountability of officers that don't, follow appropriate standards, don't use appropriate use of force. How does this protect kind of Westborough residents? Like, isn't there a relationship between post and certification where, there's a process that you're supposed to follow for use of force. If an officer doesn't, and then that's investigated, then what?
So basically, some of the new software that we're implementing, it tracks all of that. So all that information that we have to send to post, is readily at our fingertips. But what it also does is, it also says, okay, we had 3 use of force by this particular officer in this time period, and it flags that, and it sends to all the sergeants, hey, wait a minute, you may want to take a look at this. So we're all on the same page, because one sergeant may give someone a reprimand on something, another, and you never hear about it. So it's all about
Transparency,
consistency and accountability. And then we take the appropriate action. I wish I could say, as a police chief coming on 10 years, that I didn't have disciplinary issues. They do arise. And good people have bad days too. So. But I think by being a part of this process to stay focused on accreditation, post, it really is being consistent and you're treating. He hit the nail on the head. People want to know what the rules of engagement are. They want to be held accountable. They appreciate that. And
most
that's
people
what
want to do the right thing, right?
do. If you hire
regardless
good-
of,
and
certainly.
we want to weed those people out that don't.
Right.
We can train you to be a very good police officer, but we can't train you to be a good person.
Right.
If you're not nice, so that's the part of the very thorough background investigation, and that's the part of really keeping an eye on things, and making sure that probationary period, we're really doing our due diligence. And I think all the things that we talked about, especially this program, the accreditation program, I think it sets this professional standard and tone on your agency where even when we apply for grants now, I'm hoping, okay, we get that second look. Because, hey, this is a department that believes in best practices, especially when we can actually say, we did with the first department and, under version 6, which was very challenging. Because now it's dealing with post, which is all new.
And post is an actual commission.
Yes.
Sits in Boston, right?
Yes.
And so there it's so just from our viewers' perspective, when you're referring to that, if there. A lot of this data, I don't want to say all of it, has to go to post for review, right? As an ongoing part of their responsibility and oversight of.
An example of that would be we came to town meeting and we said we need this much money.
Yep.
And what happened was Post changed the rules of retention of these videos.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So I had to come back because that was a big deal. When I came before the board and
Yeah.
I said, listen,
Here's the number.
this is great. Everybody wants these things.
Sure.
But this is what it is now. But who knows where these costs are going to go.
I
And
remember you did say that.
Yeah.
we were at in-service yesterday talking to a large department out in the western part of the state, and this city can't do it. They just don't have the funding for it. And thinking outside the box, grant money. I mean,
Sure.
they applied for a grant, the lieutenant applied for a grant that actually paid for part of our software that we're utilizing during this. It paid for their overtime because they had so many
Right.
man hours. So,
Sure.
we're doing whatever we can to minimize, but I still have to come before you and
Yeah.
say, they want us to hold this video
Right.
storage longer,
Right.
and I need, I'm not sure,
a minimum of 180 days.
so,
stored.
and that was thousands of dollars,
Sure.
more because we want to make sure we meet
Right.
that Post
Right. And
requirements.
it's always a balance, right? We want to continue to better our services, better the delivery to our,
Right.
to our residents, and but there is a cost to doing that. But to your point, pennies on the dollar, right?
Mm-hmm.
One incident, right? One incident where maybe there was, God forbid, right? There wasn't appropriate training, appropriate oversight.
Right.
Policies and procedures to fall back on, the training that goes around that, right? Catastrophic,
it's not-
demoralizing for a department,
For the town. for the
town,
community.
trust. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
It's
just
not your word against my word.
Yeah.
It's basically this is what happened. And
Sure,
especially when you're dealing with a major incident where you could have 4 cameras that
Right,
are activated,
right,
so you're
right,
getting
right.
multiple angles. The technology and the things that we purchase, so when the blue lights go on,
Right.
the camera turns on. So if someone takes out their taser or unholsters their firearm,
Sure.
the camera turns on.
Right, right.
So there's a cost to that, but it minimizes human error.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you need it,
Yep.
it's there.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's
Right,
and it's good
right,
stuff. And
right.
and we can always do things better. So during review of different things, the lieutenant may see something, and we're able to say,
Sure.
hey, not a big deal here,
Right.
staff, but
Change it.
Yeah, it's
we need to
opportunity
change
for
this
training and education.
because we
and
want to
yeah,
be better,
yeah,
better, better.
Right.
So,
Well, we want to, obviously, there's nothing. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say it. I don't wear the badge, but in some ways, there are probably many things that are automated and mechanical about what you do, if you will. But yet in a very dynamic situation of high intensity, and
Right.
so that human factor.
take away that motor skill of I got to double tap this camera to
Right.
the lights go on, it's on.
Sure.
It really takes away, because we talked about
Yeah.
this. We're human.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Right,
make
right,
mistakes.
Right.
And it's technology, which is
Right.
great about this is, let's say, and we had this happen once at a critical incident where one of the cameras didn't activate. So, it does happen,
Mm-hmm. Sure,
where technology fails too, which is so important that
Yep.
each officer has
Has
their own.
Right. It's not like, where's the guy with the camera?
Share it, yeah.
Yeah.
We're sharing it with everybody.
So, quick change of content before we wrap up. You guys have an event coming up for the community at the end of April. Bingo. Do you want to just let them know about that?
I believe it's the 21st, but don't quote me on
I think
that.
I think it's Friday the 21st. It's at the end of April
Yes.
break. It's a free event,
Free
right?
event. We've done this once before.
And it was a huge hit,
was awesome,
right?
It was unbelievable. So we partnered up with Westborough Youth and Family Services. We had a recent Human Alliance meeting, and as you know, we have some folks that are coming into town that are homeless
Yep.
and that are coming in from other countries. We're going to invite those
Awesome.
people to meet them and make them feel welcome,
Great.
part of our community, as well as friends and family,
Excellent.
far and wide.
Excellent.
So yeah, our community engagement team, Officer Joe Sabati, Detective Alicia O'Brien, Sergeant Shipperett, and I'm sure Lieutenant Daniels will be there with our families,
Awesome.
and it's a great event. Please come out.
All right. Well, I don't know. I'll be on my way back from Florida, so I don't know if but if I'm back, I'll be there. So.
You're not going to come back in a hurry.
Yeah, no. I'm coming back on Friday, but I just don't know if I'll be back in time. But I think it's great that you guys are doing that. I think the more that our community can connect with and relate to our public safety officials, I think that there's just better understanding of kind of citizen responsibility and that
Yeah.
you guys are there to support and
That's why we changed the name from
Yeah.
community policing to community engagement,
Yeah.
and we want the community to know that we are a fabric of the community,
Yep.
that we are your police department,
Yep.
and you are part of our family as well.
Great.
And we really I mean, the partnerships with Westborough Connects.
What's for dinner? No, just
Yeah.
Probably pizza.
But we really do appreciate the support that we receive here
All right.
in Westborough.
Guys, thank you so much for being my guest.
welcome.
Congratulations, and we'll hear about accreditation. You said in a couple months.
Probably
maybe?
about, I would
think
say
June.
June.
June. Excellent. Awesome.
Yeah, we'll be
Great. All right. Well, we'll have to. I don't know if it's appropriate to say pop the champagne.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, thank you again for tuning into this episode of the 01581 Let's Talk. We'll see you on the next episode.